Afternoon, everyone. Just to say we'll start in just a few minutes. I see lots of people are still arriving. Just for your information, there is interpretation at this event, and to access the interpretation, you simply click on the globe icon towards the bottom of your screen. This is only available on the desktop version of Zoom, however, so you'll have to download that version if you'd like to access the interpretation. So just a few more minutes, we'll give some more people some time to arrive and we'll get started. Thank you. Okay, so hello everyone, good afternoon, and welcome to this third and final webinar of the GFCM's Online Forum. My name is Anna Carlson. I am the Fishery Officer for Socioeconomic Issues at the GFCM. Together with Marco Costantini, a colleague from the WWF Mediterranean Marine Initiative, we will be co-hosting today's session. Today's topic is the experience of small-scale fisheries promoting resilience and economic innovation in light of the COVID-19 crisis. So just before we get started, I want to give you some useful information for this webinar. To facilitate participation from stakeholders around the region, and I've seen we have quite a few joining us today, we have a number of different languages of interpretation. So English and French will have active interpretation, meaning speakers will use these languages, whereas the other languages will be passive, meaning that you can simply listen to the languages by selecting the channel. Those languages are Arabic, Croatian, Greek, Italian, Russian, Spanish, and Turkish. So just to access the interpretation, there is a globe icon at the bottom of your screen. Note that this is only available in the desktop version of Zoom. This is unfortunately not available in the online version. Also, because of some of the settings and limitations in Zoom, there are some different channels, they're listed on the screen, that you should follow. So if you wish to listen to Arabic, you should select the Korean channel. If you wish to listen to Croatian, check the Chinese channel. For Greek, select the German channel. For Italian, select the Japanese channel. And for Turkish, use the Portuguese channel. We also encourage you to engage with us online during this event and also after it by following the GFCM and also by using today's hashtag #FisherVoices. So today's event, after some opening remarks by the GFCM Executive Secretary, we will have a short opening presentation, including some videos, as well as 2 panel discussions and a Q&A session. The first panel will be moderated by, next slide please, will be moderated by Marco from WWF, and this will facilitate will have a focus on value chain and market innovations and their role in promoting the resilience of the small-scale fisheries sector during the COVID-19 crisis. So we'll have 4 panelists on this panel. The next panel is a discussion that will examine the role of social protection in reducing vulnerabilities to shocks and promoting long-term resilience for the small-scale fisheries sector. I will moderate this panel, and we have 3 distinguished panelists on this panel as well. Following these 2 panels, we will open the floor to questions from the audience. If you have questions for any of the panelists that you'd like us to address during the Q&A session, I invite you to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. When you submit a question, it would be really great if you could also sign it with your name and your affiliation, so your organization or your country, so that we know who's asking. Also, instead, if you have any other questions or you want to communicate to event organizers or share information with other attendees, we ask you to use the chat function for that. So it really helps us if you can keep these 2 functions separate. That would be great. Finally, I want to let you know that we will make everything available from this webinar available online after the event. So you'll have the recording of the webinar, the presentation, any key conclusions, and also relevant materials. So you'll have access to all of that. And with that, so moving beyond these housekeeping issues, I will hand the floor to Mr. Abdullah Shrour, the GFCM Executive Secretary, to say a few words of welcome. Mr. Shrour will speak in French in case you wish to switch over to interpretation now. So over to you, Mr. Shrour.
Merci Anna. Bonjour tout le monde, chers collègues et amis. Je vous souhaite la bienvenue à ce 3e et dernier webinaire du forum en ligne organisé par la Commission générale des pêches pour la Méditerranée de la FAO sur le thème du renforcement de la résilience du secteur de la pêche et de l'aquaculture pour l'après-Covid-19. Cette série de webinaires vient compléter 2 documents.
Oops, I believe we've lost connection.
Donc, on n'arrive pas une petite seconde, s'il vous plaît. Ça, il faut prévoir dans ce genre de réunion. Alors, je disais que donc il y a eu 2 documents qui sont préparés par le secrétariat. L'objectif est d'approfondir certains domaines présentant un intérêt spécifique pour nos travaux afin de diffuser l'information auprès des parties prenantes concernées dans notre région. Les 2 premiers webinaires ont porté respectivement sur l'expérience des organisations internationales ainsi que sur l'expérience du secteur aquacole dans la mise en place de bonnes pratiques face à la crise de COVID-19. Si vous n'avez pas eu l'occasion d'y participer, je vous encourage à visiter le site internet de la CGPM où vous pouvez consulter les enregistrements, prendre connaissance des principales conclusions et trouver également d'autres ressources utiles. Aujourd'hui, pour ce 3e et dernier webinaire, nous nous penchons sur l'expérience de la CGPM, de la pêche artisanale au niveau de la zone de la CGPM. Ce secteur, particulièrement crucial pour assurer les moyens de subsistance des populations de la région, a été fortement touché par la crise. Pour cette raison, il mérite qu'on lui accorde une attention toute particulière. J'attends avec beaucoup d'intérêt nos discussions et je suis confiant qu'elles permettront d'approfondir notre réflexion sur les besoins stratégiques futurs de ce secteur. Et j'espère très bien que ce moyen de communication à distance permettra d'atteindre l'objectif qui est attendu de ce webinaire, le 3e. Et donc, sans plus attendre, je donne la parole à Madame Anna Carlson, du secrétariat de la CGPM, qui va nous présenter, pour commencer, les impacts de la COVID-19 sur le secteur de la pêche artisanale. Miss Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Struer, and thank you for this welcome and for setting the scene for this event. As Mr. Struer said, I'll give a short presentation. I wish to provide you with some context on the impacts of the COVID-19 crisis on the SSF sector, with particular attention on market-related issues and social protection. So why are we focusing on small-scale fisheries in this webinar? As Mr. Struer mentioned, small-scale fisheries make up the overwhelming majority, about 84%, of the fishing fleet in the Mediterranean and Black Sea region. They also provide employment for over 150,000 people in the region, and this figure only includes those who work on board. It doesn't include those who support the sector from shore in the pre- and post-harvest activities, or gleaners or shore-based fishers. And it also doesn't include the often unrecognized labor of women from the household who are essential to the fishing activity. Despite the importance of this sector for livelihoods in the region, workers in this sector are often informal. They lack formal work contracts and the associated benefits that come with it. They often also earn much less than those in other fishing sectors. So while our research shows that small-scale fishers are not necessarily poor, they are a highly vulnerable group, and unforeseen shocks that upset the status quo, such as the COVID-19 crisis, can strongly affect small-scale fishers, upsetting the delicate balance that allows them to provide for themselves and their families. So how did COVID-19 affect this sector? We thought that it'd be much more interesting to hear from the fishers themselves, and so we've prepared a short video.
Да, има и промяна в цените са паднали надолу. Ами, трудно.
Няма пазар много, така ли?
Еми да, звъним на приятели, заведения, едва. Той няма много риба като цяло, но Ако имаше риба, нямаше да можем да я продаваме на това цена и нямаше да успяваме да я продаваме на цялата.
The prices are going down because people don't have enough money because they don't work like before, so the prices go down, yes.
Y nada, aquí el pescado que se ha vendido en subasta de la lonja por los pescaderos, le han tenido que coger, comprarlo y después venderlo en sus plazas por teléfono, llevándolo a la casa de cada persona o por internet. Ha vendido la gente del pescado. Ha sido un poquillo complicado, esto del coronavirus ha afectado a todo el mundo. Muchos negocios cerrados y esto ha sido mal para todos.
Aujourd'hui, sur le port de Sète, avec les mois que nous venons de passer, la crise sanitaire du Covid a eu un impact dans les premières semaines. Très peu de bateaux, très peu d'apports, pas trop de ventes sur les produits. Après, ça a redémarré doucement. Et c'est vrai que ça n'a pas été un bon point pour des professionnels actifs comme nous.
صار في تغيير في سعر السمك لأنه نحن السمك عندنا قل وصار في عليه طلب زيادة والمستورد اللي كان يجي وقف والدولار يعني طلع كمان هيدا كله بأثر على سعر السمك خلاه يرتفع.
والله فترة الكورونا سكتوا الكروفات هذه رخيصة ياسر تتباع خاطر ما مش عارف ما فماش المستورات يخدموا رخيصة مش كروفات توصل 20,000 كيلو 25,000 كيلو كروفات رويال كل واحد قداش يجيب قد يجيبوا بالترن تحت نجيبوا في كان باهي نجيب 10 كيلو واربع بحرية وفلفل ورايس واحد ومازوت ما تخلصش من كل.
La manera de solucionar el problema no es que se terminara, pero sí de una manera fue que las embarcaciones, en vez de salir todas las embarcaciones a la vez, salieron una parte de la flota y la parte de pescadería lo que hizo fue venta online, servicio a domicilio para que hubiera un poco más de demanda.
Kaya barbunumuz var, kefalimiz var, deniz devletlerimiz var, normal çamurcu barbunlarımız, dil balığımız, dülgerimiz, karideslerimiz, yani tezgahımızda.
Pendant la crise, nous avons sur notre site internet mis plusieurs photos, plusieurs recettes avec la marque Méditerranée Sauvage.
Quan els canvis que hem implantat, no, nosaltres no hem fet cap de canvi. Hem continuat anant a pescar i venent el nostre producte a la subhasta. El que ha tingut que fer el canvi ha sigut el peixater. S'ha tingut que buscar vendre el peix online o portar-lo a casa de la persona que el trucava i li demanava el peix. En el nostre cas no hem fet cap canvi.
Biz de Foça Merkez Su Ürünleri Kooperatifi olarak koronada 65 yaş üstü biliyorsunuz çıkamıyor dışarıya. Biz onlara hizmet olsun diye balıklarına evlere servis olarak temizlenmiş bir şekilde getiriyoruz. Şu an biliyorsunuz dün akşam rol ve gırgır teknelerimiz yasağa girdi. Yasağa girdikten sonra balık fiyatlarımızda bir artış olmadı. Çünkü neden? İnsanlar artık sokağa çıkamıyor, yapamıyor. Kıyı balıkçımız mağdurdu, kıyı balıkçımızın balığı da buraya geliyor. Ve biz burada Foça Merkez Su Ürünleri Kooperatifi bütün tezgahlarda balığımız mevcut. Ve bu şekilde insanlara yardımcı olmaya çalışıyoruz.
Thanks very much to these fishers for sharing their experience. And thanks also to our colleagues from the administrations around the region, as well as from WWF and from MEDAC, the Mediterranean Advisory Council, for their help in preparing these interviews with the fishers. So what we hear from the fishers echoes what emerged through the analysis carried out by the GFCM, that being early on in the crisis, small-scale fisheries were one of the hardest hit sectors, with up to 90% of small-scale vessels not operating during the first weeks of the crisis. This was primarily because of lockdowns, because of the impossibility of complying with social distancing on board, but it was also due to dramatic changes in demand for fish products. These particularly were due to closures in export markets, but also closures in local fish markets, as well as the closure of the HoReCa sector, the hotel, restaurant, catering sector. Logically, these factors also had an important impact on production early on to meet demand. And these factors also affected prices, with an initial decrease in prices around the region between 20 and 70%. particularly those species that are typically sold to restaurants, like shrimp, for example, as we heard in the video, were particularly affected. So while SSF was generally hardest hit early in the crisis, in many cases they also proved to be the most resilient and adaptable sector, often recovering more quickly than the industrial sector. That 90% inactive figure didn't stay that way for very long. So we had the small-scale fleet returning to the sea quite quickly in many cases. However, as we heard from the fishers in the video, the sector innovated and was able to shift towards shortened value chains and direct sales to consumers. We also saw that those fishers that were most successful in adapting also tended to be those who were well organized through their cooperatives and local organizations, and were able to quickly coordinate among themselves to limit the number of fishing days in line with demand, controlling the amount of product on supply on the market, and also helping to stabilize prices. In addition to market responses, social protection has been one of the primary tools governments and associations have used to respond to the crisis. So just to step back, as I know not everyone is familiar with some social protection jargon, social protection is defined as the set of interventions whose objective is to reduce social and economic risk and vulnerability. FAO breaks down social protection into three categories, that being social assistance, so things like cash transfers, social insurance, which are more the typical social safety net programs you tend to think of, unemployment programs, health insurance, pensions, for example, and labor market protection, things like job training. Also, while social protection can be formal, typically we think of those programs provided by governments, it can also be semi-formal, provided by NGOs or religious organizations or even fisher cooperatives. Or it can be informal, that kind of last resort assistance from relatives or communities, that kind of thing. So colleagues from the World Bank have put together a really useful resource that tracked social protection interventions around the world during COVID-19. And using their database, we ran an analysis of the programs. Well, essentially, these programs are national level programs being implemented in the Mediterranean and Black Sea region. So not every program may necessarily be available to small-scale fishers. Nevertheless, this provides an interesting insight into the kind of interventions being promoted. And you'll see on the screen that the analysis shows that the majority of social protection interventions were social assistance programs, the ones in blue you see, followed by social insurance in yellow and labor market measures in red. Furthermore, it was interesting to see that of the social assistance programs, about 66% of those interventions were either ad hoc or one-off programs, which speaks really to the crisis response nature of many of these interventions. So moving to the analysis that the GFCM carried out, specifically for the fisheries sector, the results there mirror the same findings from the World Bank. Specifically that social assistance measures, particularly cash transfers, were common, as were interventions to defer or reduce payments, such as reducing mooring costs or deferring health and social security payments for vessel owners, as well as labor market measures like training or covering the wages of crew. Finally, a number of countries also focused efforts on enhancing economic inclusion for this sector, improving access to financial resources, such as by making loans accessible, and facilitating investment, including in vessel improvements or value chain improvements. And these investments could be an essential part of a longer-term resilience strategy. So we've also asked the fishers in the region to tell us a little bit more about the role of social protection in their resilience during this crisis. So let's hear a bit from them.
اكيد كان عندنا كثير جمعيات عم تساعدنا يعني، واول ناس هن قيادة الجيش يعني ساعدتنا كل بحري عنده ورد مرس حكومي 400,000. كل إنسان كبير مريض ما بقي على حدا كمان عطوه 400,000. زائد بلدية صيدا كمان قدمت لنا مواد غذائية وتموينية، والهيئة الإسلامية كمان ساعدتنا. يعني في كتير جمعيات قدمت لنا أموال ومواد غذائية ونحن بنتشكرهم يعني اللي وقفوا قدامنا.
Bueno, aquí nosotros estamos pendientes de recibir fondos, ayuda como empresa, y hasta ahora pues, los trabajadores han conseguido acceder a la prestación por el ERTE, cobrado por el ERTE, y económicamente ha sido la única ayuda que ha tenido. Luego material no lo han tenido que facilitar las empresas, los armadores, porque no hemos tenido material de ningún organismo.
زي رضا بالعيد انا عندي فلوس عندي 1700 تيجي. لو عاوني الدولة عاونتني 200 دينار. فهمني لكن غير كيف يعني 200 دينار تو عندي شهر ونص ما فات 200 دينار. انا ندبر في راسي انا هنا مع العباد.
يعني هي يعني خلتنا يعني حملت معنا شوي من الأزمة عشان نقدر نكفي، لأنه وضع بالبلد كثير سيء، مش بس قصة كورونا يعني وقصة اقتصادية يعني على قدرنا نكفي يعني كانت هالمساعدات ساندتنا شوية.
بالنسبة للتغطية الاجتماعية الله اللي يقدر المرة الجاية حاجة وحيدة بالصحيح بالسكر باش بلايص قايع بالسكر، لكن يلزم البحار يشوفوا المحل باش يخدم، الناس تحب تخدم، اذا كان ارتحت نهارين لا ما تلقى ما توكل الصغار، فهمتوا؟ على الاقل يسيبوا البحار يمدوا لهم في الترخيص في البونو ترونسبورت خليه يحوطوا في الترخيص بالجيان المقال، على الاقل حتى ما ثمش الدولاب اخر على الاقل البحار يخدم شويه، المواطن يحاسب كعب الحوت باش ياكل، اذا كان تسكر على البحار وتسكر على كيف باش يعمل المواطن؟ باش ياكل المواطن؟ ما عندهم منين ياكل.
Como pescador, bueno, jo sempre he pegat perquè m'il·lusiono molt i ho veig amb il·lusió. Jo crec que podrem tirar endavant, però necessitem que s'estigui en compte i que s'ajudi, perquè ara, ja dic, la flota artesanal està molt tocada, les pesqueries en terra van desapareixent, el peix canvia d'hàbitats i bueno, jo crec que necessitem bastanta ajuda.
Thanks very much to the fishers for giving their voices to these videos. So we've heard from them a bit that while some assistance is reaching the sector, most measures are emergency measures, and perhaps there's a need to reflect a bit more widely on how do we reduce vulnerability in this sector to acute shocks in the future. So with that, I'll wrap up very quickly, leaving you with some key messages from the GFCM's analysis. COVID-19 represents an acute shock to the SSF sector, but we know that future shocks also loom, potential economic recessions from COVID-19 and even climate change. So how do we learn from this experience and address these vulnerabilities of this sector? Well, the key actions that need to be implemented are those that have already been identified and agreed upon and highlighted in the key instruments, such as the GFCM's Regional Plan of Action for Small-Scale Fisheries. So what's needed is to double down on implementing these key priority actions, namely reinforcing sustainable fisheries management and fighting IUU fishing, so ensuring that there are fish in the sea to be fished. Also strengthening fisher organizations and engaging stakeholders in decision-making. Facilitating marketing innovations such as direct selling and others that allowed the SSF sector to be flexible and responsive in the face of this crisis. And facilitate a reflection on the role of social protection, not just as an emergency response tool, but as a tool to address vulnerabilities and promote the sector's capacity to respond to future shocks. So with that, I thank you very much for your attention, and I will now hand the floor over to Marco Costantini from WWF to moderate our first panel discussion on value chains and market innovation facilitating the resilience of the sector during COVID-19. Marco, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Anna. Good afternoon, everyone. We are now entering the center of the conversation of today on how small-scale fishers reacted to the crisis caused by COVID-19. We heard some voices from the video. Now, in particular, we would like to understand how COVID-19 had an impact on that set of activities that fishers perform to deliver a profitable seafood products to the consumers. Directly from the voices of those who have reacted to this crisis, to this situation, we will hear the lesson learned in Italy, in Turkey, and in Morocco. I do not want to steal any more time, and I would start with the first question to Claudia Benassi. Let me first kindly remind the panelists to not exceed 3 minutes to answer to the questions. Thanks. Well, Claudia, you are from Impresa Pesca Coldiretti, and Coldiretti has as its mission to bring consumer and producer closer all together. So my questions are, how have you seen this, the Coldiretti mission, this mission evolved during the COVID-19 crisis in Italy? And do you think that the model of the direct selling and the short supply chains played a key role in the resilience of the SSF sector during the crisis in Italy? The floor is yours, Claudia.
Marco, hi everybody, and I have a to be more precise. It was just the trust guarantee link established over the years between producers and consumers within the direct selling market promoted by Coldiretti that allowed to keep providing a sail home delivery service in many Italian cities during the COVID-19 lockdown. For years, Coldiretti has believed in the relevance of direct selling and short supply chain, and in the opportunity they give to small companies to reach inaccessible squares and cities. Through the network of Campagna Amica Foundation, Coldiretti created reference points in 1,041 local markets spread all over the nation, investing more and more in indoor markets and establishing a confidential relationship with consumers to succeed in giving an added value to Italian agri-food products. In recent years, Coldiretti has tried to insert more and more fish companies in so-called farmers market to expand the for-sale products range, including fish also in the hinterland, relied on the fact that the presence of fish products in markets generally performs an attractive function, encouraging the presence of consumers and the purchase of other food products. To date, in fact, the number of fishing companies that sell their products in the Campagna Amica farmers market is increasing and amounts to 68 companies. Here, fishermen expose themselves personally and interact directly with consumers. Exactly the existence of this network has made possible the home selling and takeaway during the lockdown phase, and it was an important opportunity to help the sector. Since mid-March, the Campagna Amica markets have immediately activated, where possible, a home delivery service for quality, safe and guaranteed products. Campagna Amica has organized itself to bring shopping to families. In particular, in 10 regions, 2 of these in the hinterland, it was possible to include local fish among the agri-food products available. Small-scale fisheries represent the majority of Italian fishing, but it is a highly fragmented sector that needs support on market. For this reason, it is necessary to incentivize and exploit the opportunities linked to local and regional markets, where the demand exists for a wide range of species and fish products, other than those proposed by large industry, and easy to trade at these levels. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudia. And I would suggest if you have a link about this Campagna Amica, you can post it in the chat if there is. Meanwhile, you're finding this link, I would move to Vadet Hunal. Vadet, you are a researcher. We know that you have worked extensively with a small-scale fisher in Gokova Bay in Turkey. I'm very glad to see that you are not alone. You are with John from the president of the cooperative in Gokova Bay. And I have a couple of questions for you. I know that we know very well that you two structure a very strong framework with this cooperative. So can you tell us what economic impact has this cooperative framework had for the fisher during the crisis? And in particular, we would like to know if this cooperative framework played a key role in the resilience for the fishers during the COVID-19 crisis in Gokova Bay. Thanks for that. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Marco. And hi again to everybody once again. Actually, very happy. I and also my friend John are very happy to be a part of this very useful activity, as GFCM does always, actually. Now, I will try to answer your question considering the case of Gokova as well as Turkey, because I'm working with all cooperatives in Turkey, not only fishery cooperative of Akyaka, which is located in Gokova. But we are lucky because John has a great experience, 40 years experience on fisheries, as well as a fishery cooperative, not only fisheries, but also cooperation among fishers, cooperatives in terms of cooperatives. So the impact was like Anna has already mentioned, shocked, acute shocked, which tested all of us, all the parts, stakeholders, but mostly fishers, whether they are strong enough to face this type of shock or not. So the most important impact has been seen as a decrease of price, which also affected revenue of fishers. So we have seen actually, especially on high valued species like groupers, red mullet, and so on, decrease their price almost 70% in some places because of the lack of or loss of buyers. Restaurants were closed, and if you are fishing nearby touristic place, the price are affected by tourism sector, etc. You know all these things very well, all of you. So the price decreased and revenue decreased. However, if there was a cooperative in somewhere like Akyaka Fishery Cooperative, or we have seen on the video Foça Fishery Cooperative located 70 kilometers away from Izmir, where I live, one of the biggest city of Turkey. So they try to produce some innovative approach to solve their problems against acute shock of coronavirus. So what they have done actually are classified into 4 or 5 different, let's say, behavior or attitudes. They first, I can say, Akyaka Fishery Cooperative bought the product of fishers immediately. When they bring their fish product to the cooperative, they were paid in cash. John?
Yes.
We have given their money immediately, but cooperative sold these fish to second buyers or restaurants to get money back after 3 months or after crisis, because the cooperative is strong enough financially, they have money, so they can manage to pay the, let's say, money of the fishers in advance, you know, wait for their own money as an institution for months, you know, 3-4 months, whatever. So the second one.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very good. It's a very good. It's a very good example.
It's a type of cooperation. It's a very good part of the cooperation. You know,
especially the grouper and octopus. We gave is 4 monthly, 5 monthly. Every restaurant.
Yes, grouper and octopus, because octopus, calamar, sepia, they are suitable for stocking, you know, not for other species. Here in Gökova, some of the restaurants are, you know, their cook are really good, well known, so he can manage to stock even grouper and serve it as if they're fresh. We people, Mediterranean people, prefer fresh fish. Fresh, should be fresh, not frozen. But octopus, sepia, calamari, I mean, it's up to, you know, the cook, chef. So they use these tools very well, very geniusly. And also some of the cooperatives in Turkey provided small amount of, let's say, microcredit to their members without interest, you know, for the crisis duration, 3 months, 4 months, or 1 year. Even John's cooperative provides some money, small amount, but, you know, it's better than nothing. The third one, Marco. Yes, the third one, some of the cooperative nearby here, there is Göcek Fishery Cooperative, located in a very touristic place where 11 islands are also located, very famous for yachting, yacht sailing. You know, the rich people prefer to go there and, you know, anchoring and spend time. So the cooperative let their members to sell fish directly from the sea, from the boat, to the owner of yacht.
Or the yacht.
No cut, no nothing. You know, it's a very good price of fish, has been seen and noticed, as well as it is against the rules and the principle of cooperatives, but in this period, cooperative let their members to do this, you know.
Thank you.
And
So
if you look at the
you mean microcredit flexibility, flexibility, and the cooperative.
Absolutely, yes.
But that, John, we can talk about that more. I have more space for you for other questions. I will move now to Professor Nagy, and we know, we have heard from the videos and about the closure of the markets. No? The export was closed, and this had an impact on fishers. So my question to you are to another aspect, and how important is, according to you, the international trade for the economic resilience of small-scale fishery in the region? And if we look at the future, should we encourage linkages for small-scale fisher, linkages to the export market, or as we've seen with Claudia, is more important the local market and a short value chain, or if we need both? And about this, it's important also to see if there are trade-offs that we have to take into account in terms of food security for local communities? I know are very difficult questions, but these are the most important things to deal with in this crisis. Thank you. The floor is yours, Professor. Excuse me, you are on mute. You have to unmute yourself. We are not able to listen to you.
Bien sûr, vous pouvez pas m'entendre parce qu'il était désactivé. Je vous remercie. Maintenant, c'est bien?
C'est bien.
Vous m'entendez, c'est très bien. Très bien, merci beaucoup. Alors, effectivement, c'est une question très large. Je vous renvoie au travail, l'excellent travail qui a été fait par la FAO au début des années 2000 sur cette question, sur l'impact du commerce international, sur la sécurité alimentaire et tous les intervenants de la chaîne de valeur des produits de la pêche, auxquels j'avais contribué en tant qu'expert. Bon, c'est vrai que maintenant, la période de l'après-Covid-19 se caractérise par un mouvement de relocalisation des chaînes d'approvisionnement à l'échelle mondiale, notamment les chaînes d'approvisionnement industrielles. Et ces nouvelles stratégies sont conditionnées par des impératifs de coûts de production qu'il faut faire baisser, par des questions de sources d'approvisionnement qu'il faut sécuriser, mais aussi par les marchés qui doivent être plus lucratifs. Alors, dans le cas du secteur de la pêche, il semblerait que c'est le marché qui va être la locomotive de ce changement de reconfiguration des chaînes d'approvisionnement des produits de la pêche. Si je me place dans le contexte de la zone CGPM, nous avons des économies halieutiques qui sont complémentaires, n'est-ce pas? Certes, mais avec un contraste relativement prononcé entre pays de la rive nord de la Méditerranée et pays de la rive sud de la Méditerranée. Je vais me situer dans le contexte de la rive sud de la Méditerranée. Les principaux pays producteurs, si je prends par exemple le Maroc, la Mauritanie, la Tunisie, l'Algérie, un peu l'Égypte, ils sont globalement en situation d'exportateurs nets, avec un client principal qui est l'Europe. Nous sommes donc dans une situation de chaîne d'approvisionnement régionale de dimension que je qualifierais d'intermédiaire. La question maintenant, est-ce qu'on peut, suite à notamment les effets secondaires, si j'ose dire, du Covid-19, de la pandémie, est-ce qu'on peut basculer vers un autre schéma de chaîne d'approvisionnement plus courte, c'est-à-dire nationale, sinon même locale? Alors, vous savez, avec le temps, nous avons développé dans le secteur de la pêche des segments de marché des produits de la pêche qui sont relativement segmentés et cloisonnés. Prenons un exemple. Le poulpe, qui constitue plus de la moitié du chiffre d'affaires des captures pour le Maroc et la Mauritanie, il est pratiquement quasiment exporté. Et je peux vous affirmer qu'il est hors de question de penser à créer des chaînes d'approvisionnement domestiques pour cette espèce, pour des raisons très évidentes de prix et d'habitudes alimentaires. Donc, j'en déduis que pour beaucoup de pays exportateurs de la rive sud, la pêche artisanale, pour répondre à votre question, elle continuera de dépendre des marchés à l'export. Pour les catégories de produits exportables, mais bien entendu, il en va de leur survie. Mais bien entendu, toutes les chaînes d'approvisionnement ne sont pas destinées à l'exportation. Les chaînes d'approvisionnement qui exportent, et ça on l'a démontré à travers plusieurs études, pour ces chaînes d'approvisionnement, c'est le modèle économique de production et d'échange qui est le plus en faveur de la sécurité alimentaire pour ces chaînes d'approvisionnement artisanales. Parce que généralement, on est en train d'échanger du poisson à valeur marchande élevée contre des produits de base et ça joue dans l'équilibre de la balance commerciale alimentaire de plusieurs pays. Alors, bien entendu, toute la pêche artisanale n'est pas exportatrice. Il existe des segments qui offrent des produits destinés au marché domestique, soit de façon entièrement exclusive, pour les cas, par exemple, des produits à faible valeur commerciale, comme les petits pélagiques, soit à titre épisodique. Nous avons un segment de pêche artisanale vraiment intermédiaire, où la valeur des produits est intermédiaire, et c'est ce segment-là qui nous intéresse. Et là, on peut vraiment parler de changement de configuration. Et qu'on peut espérer repositionner ces chaînes d'approvisionnement de la pêche artisanale en les orientant vers les marchés domestiques, mais bien entendu sous plusieurs conditions. Donc, à mon avis, il y a un compromis à trouver entre les chaînes d'approvisionnement destinées exclusivement à l'exportation, qu'il faudrait accompagner pour s'adapter au changement du marché international, Les chaînes d'approvisionnement spécifiques au marché domestique qui sont encadrées pour qu'elles jouent pleinement leur rôle dans la sécurité alimentaire et les chaînes d'approvisionnement à caractère, je dirais, mixte qui sont à moderniser. Et c'est celle-là qui mériterait plus d'attention dans le contexte de l'après-Covid. Dans tous les cas, le marché aura son mot à dire et il faudrait d'abord inciter la demande locale par des stratégies de prix, mais pas uniquement, car il faudrait aussi agir sur les préférences des consommateurs, etc.
Merci, très merci. Pardonnez-moi, je ne parle pas le français. Switch to English. Thank you very much. Very clear. We have to adapt to different markets. The time is a little bit running. I would like to ask now a question to Claudia, and then move back very quickly to Vedette. And to Claudia, my question is about these apps. No, in this period we saw many apps used to develop, to promote the direct selling. Do you think that this direct selling through the app should be the focus, where the small-scale fishers should put their effort? And after I ask you to be very quick, we have not much more time. So please be short. Thank you very much, Claudia.
Yes, meeting increased demand for food of higher quality and diversity using the new technologies we have today is one of the strategies we will have to face. Producers, organizations, and cooperatives should also
Claudia, I'm sorry, I'm not
producers, organizations, and fishing cooperatives could also be encouraged to concentrate the offer and face better deal with market volatility. Fish entrepreneurs must be able to get the right profit for their production and must have ensured financial stability in order to be able to invest in the future also in technological innovations and functional businesses. We think that the further steps to take, in addition to online sales, is the transformation and conservation of fish products by small companies too, in order to extend the shelf life of fish products. The possibility of extending the shelf life allows to keep the product for sale longer and perhaps offer a more user-friendly product. Just think about fillets or fish burgers. And fish enterprises must evolve, being no longer just a subject linked to the fishing phase, but become an entrepreneur able to provide innovative preparation and transformation system, able to guarantee freshness, quality, and certainty of origin. With this goal, Coldiretti has already realized activities aimed at promoting the entrepreneurial skills of the fishing sector by testing processing lines and experimenting innovative technologies for wrapping and packaging used for other agri-food sectors and which can be extended even to fisheries, such as the use of chitosan feed. At last, we must focus on the promotion of quality brands, such as those of agricultural products, known all over the world, like Parmesan, hams, wines, and oil.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Yes, your message was very clear. Now, really, Vedette, I have to ask you to be extremely concise on it. Yeah, my question to all of you is to Vedette, but also to all the panelists, and we can go back after that in the Q&A session, is about how this direct selling can be managed without promoting IUU. This is a good question. I know you should need an entire day to answer to my question. Try to be as fast as possible because I have to give the floor to my colleague Anna and the next panel.
Thank you, Marco. It's a great opportunity to express our feelings on especially this issue. we are suffering because of IUU. This is one of the biggest problems of fisheries in a global scale, not only in Turkey, but also other countries in Mediterranean and all, which covers many things. Its contents are quite large. So we should avoid from IUU and the support to direct selling. I think only solution is cooperative. Fishery cooperative means fishers. There is no any differences selling from fisher to consumer or from fishery cooperative to consumer. I think John is also going to support me about this, let's say, statement, that we should support cooperatives, Marco. You have, one sentence. Yeah. There is a very important project is going on nowadays run by WWF, namely transforming small-scale fisheries in Mediterranean. Marco is maybe, you are the coordinator, no, Marco? Yeah. So, in this, under this project, we are communicating with fishery cooperatives first to reach our solution, to do something, to collect data, whatever we need. So in fisheries management, fisheries marketing, whatever the subject is related to fisheries, we should consider fishery cooperatives. This is our solution. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you. I'll go fast. Thank you to the panelists. I give fast the floor to my colleague Anna for the next panel sections. Anna, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Marco, and thanks also to all the panelists. And sorry for the rushed format a little bit. I think we're all adapting not only to market situations, but to new technology and to these online formats and trying to understand how it works. So no doubt each time we'll get better. At this time, so I'll move into our second panel, which will be on social protection issues. And just a reminder, so I will try to keep the panelists to 3-minute responses each, so that we do have a little time at the end to come back for Q&A. And just a quick reminder, if you have questions for the Q&A session, please submit them in the Q&A box, the specific button at the bottom of your screen. Also, if we don't have time to address all of them, we'll prepare a document after the event with some responses so that we do address your questions, because I think that dialogue is important. So with that, I will move to the next panel. And my first question is for Madame Islam Benayed, who is the president of the Tunisian Association for the Development of Artisanal Fisheries in Tunisia. So, Ms. Benayed, I know that your organization has been examining social protection access for small-scale fisheries, recently holding a workshop on this topic in February, just before we all went into lockdown. So could you tell us a bit more from these discussions, what social protection programs are most valued by fishers, by your members in particular, and do you think these priorities have changed at all as a result of the COVID-19 crisis? Thank you. The floor is yours.
Merci Anna. Donc merci aussi pour le choix de ce thème très important. Et depuis plusieurs années, donc, notre association a travaillé sur ce volet et a collecté des données concernant l'insertion des pêcheurs artisanaux dans le système de protection sociale. Nous avons constaté que la majorité des pêcheurs n'ont pas d'idée claire sur les services offerts déjà par les caisses de sécurité sociale. Et suite à l'atelier qu'on avait organisé avec notre partenaire WWF Nord-Afrique donc, en février, même donc pour les pêcheurs présents qui étaient représentants de coopératives, en fait, c'était ciblé pour des coopératives de pêcheurs. Donc, ces pêcheurs n'étaient pas satisfaits des deux régimes qui existent. Et parmi les outputs de cet atelier, donc on a réussi à dégager un modèle. Ce modèle a été préparé donc par des représentants des coopératives de pêche, par les chercheurs, par les représentants des différentes administrations, même des représentants de la société civile qui sont concernés donc par et œuvrent dans le secteur de la pêche. Donc on a réussi à proposer un nouveau modèle qui est intermédiaire entre les deux régimes existants. Donc ce modèle il était accessible pour tous les pêcheurs. Donc, c'est un modèle, comment dire, moyen, donc entre les deux régimes existants. Bien sûr, il est inspiré par les régimes existants. Et normalement, ce modèle devrait être discuté avec les autorités concernées, qui sont le ministère de l'Agriculture et le ministère des Affaires sociales. Bon, à notre niveau après, donc on a essayé de faire des travaux de sensibilisation et de formation porte à porte, mais malheureusement, on n'avait pas de fonds disponibles donc, pour cette activité. Et même les petites actions qu'on a pu commencer donc, à proximité et qui ne nécessitent pas donc, beaucoup de logistique et de fonds, ils ont été stoppés par les mesures de confinement suite à la crise du Covid. Donc, en ce qui concerne la réaction des pêcheurs après la crise du Covid, et en comparaison avec le modèle qu'on a déjà élaboré avec eux à l'issue de notre atelier, donc nous pensons qu'au contraire, le modèle qu'on a préparé et les outputs de notre atelier vont être encore renforcés et défendus parce qu'en effet, nous nous sommes basés sur une réalité du terrain et cette réalité est que le métier de pêcheur artisanal, c'est un métier à risque, c'est un métier dur et saisonnier. Donc, si on repart de cette idée-là, donc bien sûr qu'on va être toujours préparé de la meilleure manière face aux crises. Et depuis notre atelier et même avant, donc notre association a beaucoup travaillé sur la structuration de la pêche artisanale. Donc, elle avait misé depuis longtemps sur le regroupement des pêcheurs en coopérative. Nous pensons que c'est très important donc, de grouper les pêcheurs et on a continué à travailler sur cet objectif même avec nos partenaires parce qu'on est vraiment conscient que ça peut vraiment améliorer les conditions de vie de pêcheurs et améliorer leur capacité de résilience face à la COVID-19, face à la crise du Covid-19 et même face à d'autres crises semblables. Merci. J'espère que je n'ai pas dépassé le temps prévu.
Non, merci, c'était parfait. Thank you very much for that intervention. It's really interesting to hear the perspective of fishers also before and also as a reaction to the crisis. So my next question, I'll move to Mr. Omar Benamour, who is a social protection officer at the FAO. And building a bit on what Ms. Benayed has said, if you can tell us a little bit more about some of the barriers for small-scale fishers in accessing social protection programs, and how do we best promote adequate access for social protection for this sector, even in the face of perhaps fiscal constraints that many governments are facing now? Thanks. Over to you, Omar.
Thanks, Anna. Good afternoon, everyone. So thanks, Islam, also for the presentation. I think it was very useful for me as well. I'm not going to repeat what has been said already. I'm going to try to be very, very short. But basically, we know that small-scale fishers have a variable and unpredictable income, large seasonality fluctuation in catch and market prices. We also know that they have a relative low adaptive capacities, high exposure to risk, as Islam said, and also we have also invisible categories such as women and gleaners, and this leads also generally to unsustainable fishing practices, while we have a large, let's say, employment possibilities in rural coastal areas, especially in the Mediterranean area. And when we talk about extending the social protection coverage to small-scale farmers, we already know that we know that there's already a limited coverage that exists within the regions. I think that we have done some studies in the region as well to show that mostly in the world, social insurance is not covering a large amount of people working in the informal sector, which is the case in the fishery sector. And so when we talk about even social assistance programs, the targeting mechanism that exists that covers the poorest of the poor are not adapted to cover fishers. So basically we know that there's a problem on this side. So generally when we talk about the barriers to have an access to social insurance for small-scale fishers, we face different types of barriers, political barriers, when we have legal barriers where small-scale fishers are not covered by the any labor law, or sometimes we have this huge problem of financial barriers where we know that systems that exist are not adapted to the, let's say, unpredictability and the low level of income of small-scale fishers in the region. So we have also these institutional and administrative barriers, as I said. Well, in some countries, the government do not have the capacities to affiliate small-scale fishers or even inform them about their rights. We have these geographical barriers, of course, because some areas are remote and so the institutions are not covering them. And then, of course, there's a cultural barriers where there's a lack of trust in social security schemes that exist among the small-scale fishers. So how do we deal with it concretely? So generally, when we work on this in FAO, we try to always promote, let's say, a systematic data collection on small-scale fishers, including on the poorest and the most vulnerable, to understand their socioeconomic characteristics, their risk and vulnerabilities, their access to social protection, also their risk management strategies and their limitation. Also, we understand that we try to also understand their barriers to have an access to social protection. And generally, we go beyond the specific role of social protection that has an interest for small social protection, let's say, practitioners. But we try to explain to people working in the fishery sector how important social protection is to improve resilience, improve natural resource management, and eventually support small-scale fisheries in diversifying their source of income. And generally, we do also cost analysis, understand how much it costs. We have the tendency to push for social insurance schemes, as small-scale fishers are a part of the active population and can contribute to a scheme. And we know that also in that case, government have also limited funds. So that's the idea here behind pushing for social insurance schemes. And then generally, we include different partners in this kind of after those assessments in terms of in order to develop some roadmaps at country level, and also of course involving communities, fishing cooperatives and different ministries to move forward and make sure that we manage to extend the coverage. So over. Thank you.
Thanks, Omar. That's really helpful and interesting in giving the overview of sort of the social protection field and what needs to be done, particularly linking, I think, social protection also to not just keeping it in a silo of a social ministry type work, but that this is something relevant also for resource management, for helping to incentivize fisher behavior. And also that the data collection that's done through fisheries management is not just a fisheries management question, but can be used also for these other dual purposes. And so the linkages between sectors, I think, is a really crucial point you've discussed here. So I'll move next to Ms. Nevena Todorova, who is from the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Forestry in Bulgaria. And Ms. Todorova, I'd like to ask you a bit about, so one of the most talked about interventions in terms of social protection in the region for fisheries has been some of the work and changes to the European Maritime and Fisheries Fund, the EMFF, which introduced some more flexibility and direct support to fishers in response to the crisis. Could you tell us a little bit more about this, in particularly how small-scale fishers are expected to be supported, and also perhaps how this initiative works with local level communities to reach those vulnerable communities? Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to take part in this very useful webinar and share Bulgaria's latest experience on overcoming the problems caused by the pandemic. In Bulgaria, as probably everywhere, fishers were under lockdown for quite a period, Points of sale for sale and markets and shops were also closed. Distribution channels were affected, and in addition, transport restrictions applied, which affected import and export. Many fishermen, producers, and processors have suspended or severely reduced their activities and have been working in a very limited regime. The European Commission has indeed taken swift actions to protect the fisheries sector from radical shocks with the changes in the EMFF. The adopted amendments made it possible for us to introduce special measures aimed at mitigating the impact of the COVID-19 outbreak on the sector. We managed to amend our OP in June and to elaborate 3 new measures to support the fishermen, producers, and processors. The provided financial assistance aims to reach a significant part of the people and their families working in the sector. It will back the activities affected by the pandemic and at the same time will help prevent bankruptcies, downsizing, or employment reduction. At this point, we have received 169 project proposals under the 3 measures, but I would like to focus on the measure addressing the fishermen as we are speaking about the small-scale fisheries sector today. Support for fishing vessel owners and fishermen. It is aimed at compensating the economic losses from cessation of fishing activities. The maximum grant is 41,000 euro per fishing vessel. This includes the compensation for the crew. Currently, we have received 79 project proposals, and they amount at approximately 1 million euro. Over 150 fishermen will be supported at this stage. Some of the applicants have submitted project proposals for more than 1 fishing vessel, which shows that the measure will contribute to maintain the activities of bigger operators in the sector along with the smaller ones. When calculating the compensation per vessel, a preference to vessels that are part of the small-scale fishing fleet is given. We have to point out that the limitation set in the EMFF for at least 120 fishing days during the last 2 calendar years is quite restrictive for the area of the Black Sea, and especially for the small-scale fishers, having in mind that the overall fishing period is dependent on seasonal catches and climate conditions. Hello?
Thanks very much. Sorry, I had some short technical difficulties there. But thanks very much, I think, for that intervention. I think, of course, this is an enormous program through the EMFF that has reached quite a few fishers and has, I think, potentially the impact it has, the ability it has to reach fishers at a local level and work with local communities through bottom-up proposals is really very interesting. So with that, although we had a few more questions for this panel, but I think I'm seeing lots of questions come through the chat, and perhaps we'll open it up to a bit of discussion and question and answer. And we might be able to come back to some of these questions here within the Q&A and touch on some of the additional issues. But I think we see a lot of active participation and we want to not lose that moment. So I will hand the floor now over to Marco, who will help us to moderate the question and answer session. Marco, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Anna. Yes, very, very active. All the listeners, many questions. We received many questions, and our colleagues summarized them, and I can start. Let me open it. The first one is for Monsieur Abdellah Sour. And the question is from Abderrahim Houak from Morocco. The question is about new technologies, such as the satellite monitoring system, the VMS, and other systems of identification. They play an increasingly important role in the maritime fishing sector. So the question is, how can the GFCM contribute to the generalization of the VMS and RFID system to the artisanal fishing segment, making better control on the IUU fishing and either contribute of the safety and rescue of artisanal fishermen? Its feasibility requires taking into account the high level of investment, conducting feasibility tests, and taking into account the specificity of this fishing segment. an important question for you, Mr. Abdullah.
Oui, tout à fait. Merci pour cette question importante. Tout d'abord, je voudrais rappeler ce qu'on connaît très bien, c'est que les technologies, les nouvelles technologies, donc en général, ils sont très importantes donc, dans tout plan de développement du secteur. En ce cas, c'est le secteur de la pêche artisanale. Alors, un premier objectif pour le pêcheur, c'est d'assurer déjà la sécurité. Nous savons très bien que dans plusieurs situations, le pêcheur, par exemple dans une situation de mauvais temps, de situation de panne de moteur, déjà les services en charge de la sécurité peinent à retrouver ou à localiser le pêcheur. Donc ces technologies, ils ont ce premier objectif très important, primordial pour le pêcheur, c'est de donner lieu à un outil qui permet un sauvetage en temps opportun et permettre de localiser et de sauver ces pêcheurs. Nous avons connu des situations très dramatiques et je pense que l'industrie de nouvelles technologies aidera sans doute à diminuer ces risques. 1, 2. En matière de lutte contre la pêche INDNR, donc tout ce qui est pêche illégale, non réglementée, non déclarée, évidemment l'introduction des technologies permet une meilleure maîtrise donc, de ce qui de point de vue localisation des activités de pêche. Donc ça nous permet de mieux donc, appréhender toute activité qui va à l'encontre des mesures qui sont en place. Les organisations internationales et les pouvoirs de décision au niveau national, donc ils déploient des mesures. Dans le cadre régional, il s'agit de mesures communes et évidemment l'existence d'une activité illégale ne peut qu'aller dans un sens contraire de tous les efforts que nous mettons pour préserver, pour conserver les ressources. Donc, c'est un instrument, ce sont des technologies qui permettent le secteur et de mieux servir tout ce qui est base de données, donc une base de données par rapport au secteur. Donc, nous savons que ces technologies permettent d'avoir une série d'informations
I think we're having some technical difficulties, Mr. Stross, hearing you. Perhaps we can move to the next question and perhaps come back to you if there is time. Thank you.
Okay, very good.
Sorry.
Thank you. The next question, thank you, Mr. Sur. The next question is for Claudia, and the question was posed by Bertrand Cazalet. There have been many transformations of how we do things, like in practices in favor of direct sales and short circuits. Do you think we should make efforts to keep these also in the future when we go back to a new normality, a new normal life? What do you think? Claudia, have you got my questions? Okay, yes. Thanks.
I think that the direct selling and the, sorry for the, okay, must be implemented and maintained as a productive channel with because the contact with between producers and consumers with the direct selling is synonymous of guarantee, trust and guarantee. So I think that this is a channel we must continue
and using.
Yes. And
Yes.
we believe that this kind of market, is important because I think it's
If I may add, Claudia, I think that if I may add, I think that all these innovation with respect to the markets that we developed during the COVID should be maintained during the next phase. Okay. Well, I will pass to another question. In this case, I will ask directly the question to Professor Nahi. And in the chat, there was a note from Mr. Zafer, a fisher from Turkey, that showing that IUU fishing increased during the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis. This IUU is an important aspect during the crisis. You know? And this was also briefly discussed in the first panel, in the first one. So the question is, why did this happen according to you, and what was being done to address the situation, to curb the IUU during the COVID-19 crisis?
Bien, bon, les réponses ont été très différentes d'un pays à l'autre. Là aussi, je vais essayer de me situer dans le contexte que je maîtrise le mieux, celui de la rive sud de la Méditerranée. Donc, la COVID-19 a imposé un confinement plus ou moins généralisé, et ce confinement a pratiquement gelé la mobilité de plusieurs instances, notamment les instances chargées, les organismes chargés du suivi de l'état des ressources, mais aussi du contrôle. Et effectivement, ça a été rapporté par plusieurs sources, notamment des pêcheurs, qu'effectivement, il y a eu une recrudescence de la pêche INN, et puisque les autorités n'avaient pas beaucoup la main libre pour agir sur ces pratiques, ils faisaient ce qu'ils pouvaient, mais effectivement, il y a eu une recrudescence de la pêche INN. Alors, cette question du INN, si je me permets de relier à une autre question qui a été tout à l'heure posée, sur est-ce que après, maintenant, si on s'oriente vers des chaînes d'approvisionnement courtes et locales, est-ce qu'on ne va pas constater la même chose? Est-ce qu'il ne va pas y avoir une recrudescence de la pêche INN? En fait, théoriquement, oui, mais parce qu'on ne passera plus par certaines étapes de contrôle, comme les halles aux poissons ou les marchés de gros, ou généralement certaines étapes clés où il y a un contrôle sanitaire et un contrôle INN. Donc, puisque ce schéma, si on va promouvoir ce schéma de vente directe, théoriquement, on pourrait s'attendre à une recrudescence à la pêche INN et même à des problèmes sanitaires. Alors, la réponse, elle est où? La réponse, il faut mettre en place une nouvelle organisation commerciale adaptée à ce nouveau contexte et qui s'appuie sur des systèmes et des technologies de traçabilité très solides. Alors maintenant, je vous renvoie au travail récent qui a été publié par la FAO sur le blockchain. Effectivement, maintenant, la COVID-19 ou l'après-COVID-19, elle a accéléré une transformation numérique. On est en train de voir beaucoup d'opérations, d'activités qui sont en train d'être dématérialisées. Et puis, suite à la demande, on est en train de créer aussi, de diversifier, de renforcer l'offre en services à distance, mais aussi l'offre de services intelligents. Donc, nous avons maintenant ce fameux blockchain ou les chaînes de blocs qui est en train de se développer, cette nouvelle concept de technologie qui est en train de se développer et qui va permettre de se doter d'un système de traçabilité très performant à moindre coût, contrairement aux démarches conventionnelles classiques, au système de traçabilité classique qui s'appuyait sur des bases de données, sur des infrastructures informatiques qui étaient très coûteuses et qui faisaient intervenir l'État. Là, avec un téléphone portable et avec des applications sur son téléphone, on peut mettre en place un système de traçabilité très, très fiable qui pourrait être accessible aux petits pêcheurs et artisans. Et donc, l'avenir, la promotion de chaînes d'approvisionnement courtes, la vente directe et tout ça, c'est un ensemble, c'est une nouvelle ère qui s'ouvre en fait avec l'intelligence artificielle, avec le développement de ces applications web qui sont accessibles et qui sont en train de présager un nouveau horizon et ça va être en faveur de la vente directe, ça va lui permettre de lutter efficacement contre la pêche INN et d'assurer la sécurité sanitaire, de contribuer à assurer la sécurité sanitaire des produits. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. I have a last questions, and then I will give the floor to Anna for the conclusion. The last question is for Madame Islam Ben Ayed, is from Abderrahim Houak from Morocco. What role can the young fisher plays in various associations and cooperatives to guarantee the future of the small-scale fishery? You are on mute, madame.
Alors, vous m'entendez, c'est bon? Parfait. Donc, je pense que les jeunes ont un rôle très important donc, via les coopératives de pêche artisanale, parce qu'on a eu un problème pour la communication avec les pêcheurs durant la période du confinement, parce qu'on ne peut pas demander à des pêcheurs qui n'ont pas un smartphone de assister à un meeting ou bien à une réunion par Skype. Par contre, pour les jeunes, donc, ils ont tendance à connaître les nouvelles technologies. Donc, ils peuvent vraiment aider beaucoup leurs parents et leurs familles pour intégrer plus la pêche artisanale donc, dans le système de nouvelles technologies. Aussi, donc, en ce qui concerne tous les dossiers administratifs, donc tout ce qui est gestion de la coopérative qui demande un certain niveau de scolarité. Donc, ils peuvent être gérés beaucoup plus avec des jeunes qui sont motivés, qui ont plus de temps libre donc, consacré à ces coopératives et qui peuvent déplacer donc, d'une administration à une autre et faciliter le travail des pêcheurs, donc faciliter l'accès des dossiers, faciliter de faire, donc ils peuvent donc faciliter tout ce qui est service administratif. Donc, je pense que les jeunes ont vraiment un rôle très, très important. Aussi, il y a le côté écologique parce que pour les jeunes, ils sont plus donc, ils peuvent communiquer plus en tout ce qui est valeur écologique. Donc, on peut les sensibiliser, les influencer mieux donc, pour tout ce qui est protection, tout ce qui est utilisation donc, de techniques de pêche sélective, durable, les bonnes pratiques de pêche, les bonnes pratiques de santé et sécurité au travail. Donc, je pense que vraiment, ils ont un très grand rôle à jouer. Merci.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the question. I would pose the same question to Madame Todorova, right, to see if, because Madame Ben Ayed gave us a vision for the Mediterranean. I would like to see if this is shared also for the Black Sea.
Yes, the situation is almost the same, but we have to encourage our young people to be included in the fishing activities. And some of our fisheries local action groups, they have special measures for them. They support the start of new businesses for young fishers under 40 years, including women. And these are mainly SSF representatives. This measure, for example, supports investments on fishing vessels, improvement of health and safety conditions on the board, vocational trainings, surveillance and security systems, also construction and some small restoration works. This seems to be interested for the young people. They are encouraged by their families, of course. They want to follow up the example of their fathers and relatives who work in the sector.
Thank you very much. Very, very last question to my friend Vadet. Now, you have 3 minutes. You have 3 minutes, and then we give the floor to Anna. Okay, let me read the question we had for you. So, one challenge that has been highlighted in the Q&A is how to get detailed information on small-scale fishery. For example, in Lebanon, we had that. I'm sure the same situation exists in many other countries. So a question is for you, how monitoring of small-scale fishery can be improved, and would this be particularly important for COVID-19 situation? How can we get more data, and how can we use this data to monitor better the SSF sector? 3 minutes.
Thank you, Marco. I will ask same question to my friend John, as a fisher. His opinion is very important, but I have my own answer, which is very clear. Actually, in Turkey, for instance, all the coasts, Black Sea, the Marmara Sea, Inland Sea, Aegean coast, and the Mediterranean, have many fishery cooperatives. The number is 572. 572 cooperatives, around 300 cooperatives, 275 marine capture-based fishery cooperatives, which means we have institution. We have fishery cooperative to help us to provide concrete, reliable data. If it is needed daily, monthly, annually, the monitoring is very expensive, and on the other hand, very complicated, not easy. Seems easy, but it is not actually. There are negative or let's say gaps or some defect of the different data collection methodologies, like questionnaires, telephone survey, face-to-face. There are difficulties. However, if we give them responsibility, we love to talk about fisheries co-management. This is a part of fisheries co-management. We should give them authority. We should give them responsibility, not only to, enforcement or other things, but also monitoring. It is there in the Declaration of Malta. The fishery cooperative, also small-scale fishers, should help to improving monitoring of the sector. So I have also personally given a presentation in the 6th World Fishery Congress, which was held in Scotland, using fishery cooperatives for better monitoring of small-scale fishers, or something like this. The title was like this. So I just emphasized on the importance of fishery cooperatives in monitoring of fisheries. Monitoring is a very essential part of the management. We cannot ignore it. If we monitor the sector, then we can get decision. We can take decision, otherwise we cannot. The decision will be wrong. So we will manage the sector in a wrong way. We can ask John whether they can help us to collect data or not. Bize veri toplamakta yardımcı olabilir misiniz? Yani kooperatif olarak.
Tabii ki de.
Yes.
Zaten topluyoruz.
English.
Yes.
English.
Yes. We had many things. Maybe since 15 years, we have a big data.
Look, there are some cooperatives that have already started to collect data. So, I don't want to repeat it again. I will focus again on importance of fishery cooperatives, even for the collection of data and the monitoring of the small-scale fishery.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you very much, John, and all the other panelists. Thank you for your professionalism. I think we can close the question and answer session here, and I will hand the floor to Anna to conclude the webinar. And Anna, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Marco, and thanks to all of the panelists for your really interesting responses in this interesting discussion. And thanks as well to all of the attendees for all of the questions you've sent in. We've taken note, we'll save them, and as I mentioned, we'll try to compile them into a document that provides a bit more complete responses and also incorporate some of the other input from our panelists. So with that, as Marco said, we're reaching the end of our time. Before I move into conclusions, I just want to say a huge thank you to the interpretation team. There's a lot of them working, and I hope it has been a successful experience. Of course, this is an experiment for all of us working on these new online platforms and with interpretation and the number of people. We had, I think, close to 200 people attending at a certain point. So it's been a very interesting format for us, and I think something that we can only improve on in the future. But I think it offers a nice opportunity to be able to hear directly from stakeholders around the region, which is crucial, as we've heard from the discussions today. So just some I'll try to summarize a bit some notes of conclusions from this event. And of course, we've cleaned these up a little and we'll make them available to you online, as I mentioned at the beginning. So it's clear from this discussion that small-scale fisheries are essential to livelihoods and food security in the region. And they're particularly important in vulnerable populations in coastal communities along the region. But to ensure the resilience of the long term, there's a need to double down on a number of different initiatives. And of course, there's many more than I'll mention here, but these are the key points I think that have come out of the discussion. So first of all, as we just heard, was the need for efficient management of all fishing activities, including small-scale fisheries, to ensure that the exploitation of fishery resources is sustainable. This includes specifically preventing and reducing IUU fishing, including through appropriate surveillance and control technologies, which can also in turn be of support for decent work and ensuring proper work conditions and that search and rescue services are available. Also, it's important the access, that small-scale fishers have equitable access to resources. This is a point underlined in the GFCM's regional plan of action. And also ensuring that small-scale fishing activities are better monitored, including catches and fishing effort, and that can be considered within the assessment of the status of resources, including their socioeconomic impact, which is useful not only for fisheries management, but also for other pieces, as we heard, for example, from Omar about the socioeconomic data needs for social protection interventions. Finally, as we were just discussing a bit about now, the need to engage small-scale fishers in decision-making processes, in data collection, and in fisheries management. So in promoting these participatory processes is crucial. Next, a big point is the need to valorize products from small-scale fisheries and enhance the profitability of the sector. That's, of course, crucial for livelihoods. So both identifying and strengthening the enabling conditions that make possible short local value chains, as we heard, for example, from Claudia and others on the first panel, ensuring that there are legal frameworks in place that facilitate direct selling and short value chains, but without increasing IUU fishing. So taking into account food safety standards and traceability issues to ensure that this adds positive benefit to small-scale fisheries and isn't an additional pressure on IUU. Building capacity among fishers to facilitate the use of key technological innovations, apps, and other tools, and support their linkages to consumers. And I think this is also something that's interesting and useful for also attracting young people to the sector. Helping to stimulate local demand of seafood and supporting entrepreneurial skills of fishers, including through processing and value addition to products. There's a need to identify and also strengthen, as we heard a bit from Mr. Nagy, the links between small-scale fisheries and export markets. So the answer isn't only local, but in some cases, particularly in certain countries, certain target species are very much dedicated and destined to trade. And so we need to understand what are those cases, what are the enabling conditions, and how can we strengthen this even when, or perhaps in light of the experience of this crisis now, and how we can avoid perhaps a total shutdown in the future. Also understanding how that can be, the small-scale fisheries sector can be linked to other blue economy sectors like tourism or others, hoping that tourism will return in strength eventually. Finally, another point is ensuring this sector has access to minimum social protection, coupled with economic inclusion programming to provide small-scale fishers with the tools to both adapt to crises and shocks that occur, but also to plan for the future and to enhance their resilience in the face of future shocks. Here, there's a need to address the barriers that prevent participation of small-scale fishers in existing social protection programs, such as informality of the sector or payment modalities or the seasonality of payments or other things like that. There's the need to ensure that small-scale fishers are considered in social protection dialogues at the national level, perhaps raising awareness about their needs and their particular context in the relevant organizations that are handling these topics. There's also a need to improve our data collection, as we've already mentioned, but that ensure that data collection is also useful for social protection targeting programs and program development. Related also to awareness raising, we want to be sure that fishers are aware of the programs they are entitled to and that they do have access to that already exist. Similarly, building on data collection, we want to improve evidence that helps decision makers to understand that social protection is not simply a cost, but it's an investment in the sector, and that it can help to strengthen other objectives, for example, fisheries management, and can be a tool that can help to support those other objectives. Finally, enhance investment and economic inclusion of the sector, including for women and less visible groups. We want to facilitate access to financial resources and savings tools and others that allow for fishers to plan for the future. And help to strengthen formalization of the sector, improved welfare, improved fisheries management, and improved profitability. So as I was saying, building those linkages across different sectors and not simply looking at social protection as a social ministry issue, fisheries management as a fisheries management issue. And a final point to wrap up here, as I know I'm pushing on our time with the interpreters, is the need to strengthen small-scale fisheries organizations. So that has been a theme running throughout, ensuring we enhance capacity to participate in decision-making processes, including co-management, strengthening cooperation among fishers so they're able to react to shocks that may happen, such as COVID, strengthening the role of youth in cooperatives and enhancing the attractability of the sector to young people, linking the cooperatives with market opportunities, and strengthening the role of small-scale fishery organizations to provide those safety net services when others don't exist. So with that, that's a very sort of rough list of conclusions and notes that we've taken a bit during this event, but I hope that I've sort of touched on some of the key points that we've discussed. And I hope that this webinar becomes not the end of a discussion, but the start of one. So I hope that we can build on these conclusions and use it to move forward and strengthen our work on these topics in light of implementing the Regional Plan of Action for Small-Scale Fisheries in the region. So with that, I thank you once again. I thank all the panelists. I thank our interpretation team, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.